Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another Brand Swan Live. Today, we're going to be talking with Valerie Lane, who is an absolutely amazing woman, who I've gotten the pleasure to know over the past couple years, a few different ways. I don't even remember how we met, Val, but welcome and thank you for coming on today. Um,
Thanks for having me.
yeah. So, for everyone who doesn't already know Val, which I feel like how could you not have heard of Val? She has the new director of marketing at Spur Impact. Woohoo! Also, the owner of Ms. Social Mogul, a social media marketing company, a yoga instructor, and drumroll, now a published author. So I don't even know where to get started, Val, but I know I want to ask how you manage it all, but we're not here to talk about time management. We're here to talk about the book. So go ahead and tell us about, I guess, that like first moment of inspiration. How did this idea even come about?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I want to say I'm honored to be on the Brand Swan Live. I've been observing all the different guests you've had for the last year or so, and I think it's just great. So I'm so excited to be on. So the inspiration for the book, we could really kick it all the way back to kindergarten. I have always loved reading. My parents will tell you that I was a nightmare to teach how to read. And I want to say that's because my brain is just so creative. But in kindergarten, I wrote this book, little project about a cat and then another cat, and they met and became friends. And then there were hundreds of cats. And this book was passed around the kindergarten teacher in elementary school, McVeigh Elementary in Rob Scott Manor, probably to everyone who could get their paws on it, pun intended, because they thought it was hilarious that the 6-year-old had just, crafted this book story. So past that, my love of reading really blossomed. And I was always the kid, with a book underneath the desk, like not following the rules. And I really became addicted to the Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events books because they were so interesting to me. Obviously, Lemony Snicket was huge, continues to be huge. And in 4th grade, I was writing a book report on the first book. And I get to the end of the book report when you kind of have to, wrap it up. And I just got so frustrated and was like, this is dumb. I don't want to write about somebody else's book. I just want to write my own book, and that'll be the project. And so from that day forward, I knew I had wanted to write a book. It was always something that was kind of inside of me. So boring middle school, blah, 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 high school, you go to college, whatever. And so this was always sort of in the back of my head. I was not an English major. It did not seem to be something that would produce a lucrative career that my parents were interested in. And so finally, we fast forward to 2020 pandemic times, and I had a friend who had published through New Degree Press, which is hybrid publishing model. And she had some really wonderful success through it. Her book was called Groomed. And I said, Sam, like, how did you do this? I think I want to take this opportunity when the world has kind of shut down and gotten quiet to try my hand at writing a book. And so she, connected me with Eric at the Book Creators Institute, and he partners with New Degree Press. And I just sort of jumped into the process and got to work with the amazing team there. And here we are, less than a year later, from the first words on the page to a published book.
Yeah, I have heard some people say that everyone has a book inside of them. And I'm curious, do you think that's true?
What a wonderful question. I actually don't think everybody has a book inside of them, because sitting down to write a book is arduous and mundane and frustrating. And so while everybody has a story and everybody has experiences and everybody has something to teach, right? Like, I believe everybody can be a teacher. I don't necessarily think everyone has a book inside of them, just like not everyone has a marathon inside of them, just like everyone doesn't have, being a mom inside of them, right? Like, there's different roles that we can play. And while it's a wonderful inspirational thing, I think it resonates with the people who do have a book inside of them, and they just kind of need that push because it's hard to write a book. It was not an easy process. I'm in the middle of writing my second one now, and it's definitely easier the second time around because I kind of know the landscape. But I think if you want to write a book, yes, you have one inside of you, but I don't think it's great to pressure everyone into feeling like they have to add this to their,
Oh, your bucket
CV,
list.
their bucket list. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, leading into that topic, what were some of the biggest challenges? I know you said it's a lot of work, but what popped up and you were like, I don't know if I can go on, or did anything happen that made you feel that way?
Oh yeah. So everyone knows a good story arc. I can't bring up Harry Potter because I still haven't read the seventh book, and I know that feels like a crime, but I'm saving it. I'm saving it. I don't want it to end, so I'm just sort of hovering at the post sixth book bliss. This summer, I'm sure I'll plow through it. It's a good vacation read because you can't put it down. But every good story arc has the moment where the climax of the book is happening, and you're like, what's going to happen next? Like I'm interested, right? Your reader is gripped. And that was a huge hurdle for me because I wanted it to be interesting and I wanted it to be good. And I must have written 4 or 5 different plots of like what happens, what is the peak here. And at one point my editor was like, are you gonna write a psychological thriller? Like, is that the direction we're going in? And I was like, no, I'm not, but I think I'm just struggling because I like to read a lot of psychological thrillers, that it felt natural to have a man with a gun walk in kind of a moment. But I needed to stay in my lane. So there was a point last, I think August, where I just couldn't figure out how to move the story forward. And it's very easy to get discouraged because you think, oh, well, I don't have it inside me. I can't do it, or this is not going to be good. So why would I finish this? Or, you just start to doubt your own abilities. Setting the scene is fun and somewhat straightforward because you've been thinking about the beginning of it for a while, but actually pushing through and making it interesting throughout, making sense throughout, that was the hardest part for me. So I hope it got to a good point. And to be honest, I think I'm going to have the same hurdle with book number 2. There's just so many ways you could go about doing it, that it sometimes feels, halting. You just don't know what direction to go in.
Yeah. So it's interesting what you said about being influenced by the types of books that you were reading, because that's something I've noticed with my own writing style. Like I start using really quirky language and I'm like, oh, I've been reading Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So
Yeah.
my clients' marketing accounts probably shouldn't sound like that. Do you feel like there were any books or specific genres that influenced you in the way you wanted them to?
Yes, there's an author named Jen Hatmaker, and she is a nonfiction writer. She's actually more of like Christian writing, and it's not as if I'm a huge religious person, but her vocabulary is so interesting to me that it just pushes me beyond the same sort of words I'd use over and over again. Because when you get into a groove, you just start to repeat the same words that sound good or the same sort of sentence structures. And so Jen came out with a book last April, and she came out with a book again, I guess this April too. Last year it was Fierce, Free, and Full of Fire, and this year it was Simple and Free. And reading her book last summer was just helpful to think outside of the box. Another really helpful genre is obviously fiction, but fiction with a lot of dialogue, because dialogue is one of the toughest things to write for me. I think it's tough for a lot of people because what we read is different than what we watch on TV, and it's different than how we speak in person. And so I would try and imagine, okay, if this were a movie, how would it sound? So watching movies with a lot of dialogue, like A Marriage Story, there's just a ton of really intense dialogue between the couple in that one, was helpful just to kind of think through, okay, if someone's reading this and thinking it out loud in their head, what's going to make sense? I did a lot of workshops and things to educate myself as well. but in terms of other books that were inspiration, I just liked to diversify what I was reading, more poetic stuff, more nonfiction stuff, just to sort of keep it fresh when I was putting new words on the page.
Yeah, that's great that you did so much research because I think a lot of people, self included, sit down to write and you're just like blah 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 and it's all internal. But the more you absorb, the better writer you're going to be. Okay, now that we've danced all around it, what can you tell us about the plot of this particular book without giving too much away?
Yeah, so it's good because I am now sort of in the middle of writing book number 2, so I'm not as close to the plot of book number 1 anymore. So it's good. I won't spoil it. So this book is really about mental health. And we're sort of set up with this young woman named Harper. And she is really struggling in chapter 1. No spoilers here. She's just sort of trying to go through normal activities like going grocery shopping or going to work. And you can see that things are sort of coming apart at the seams. And so she has a best friend throughout the story who really is a guide in some sense. But Harper basically needs to jump into healing herself from a traumatic breakup that she went through. And so she is in a group therapy session for the first time. And you meet a lot of different people in group therapy sessions. Even if you've never actually been to one yourself, you can imagine, movies like Rent or I know Rocket Man has a group therapy thing. And even though I've not seen that movie quite yet, it is on my list. Or just, different TV shows that have AA circles. You could kind of imagine a motley crew of sorts coming together who have all had, similar experiences. And it's really hard for Harper to digest the fact that she's in this situation and other people are in her similar situation of sort of healing from a traumatic instance. And so we get to follow Harper's healing journey. We get to meet some really fun characters throughout the way. And the final chapter is sort of a look ahead as to where she ends up, which I thought was really, really fun. And it's probably my favorite chapter of the entire book. So I can't talk too much about it because it'll give everything away. But I was just so happy with how it was probably the chapter I needed to edit the least because it just wrapped up really nicely.
Yeah. And in case we didn't already say the title, that is The Knowing by Valerie Lane, where can people find your book if they want to buy it?
It is available on Amazon right now. You can get the ebook for 99 cents for the first 30 days, which is a steal. Or you can get the paperback, or you can get the paperback for $14.99 to your house. I'm actually still waiting on all of my author copies. So anyone who pre-ordered with me, who's getting a signed copy, it is coming. And I'll hopefully do some sort of a live signing or IG live to do that. I'm really excited to get my hands on them, but it is available now if you didn't pre-order and you just want to go on and get it yourself.
I was gonna say, that's me. I'm one of the people getting an author signed
You
copy.
are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about mental health, I guess, and what inspired you to tackle that as the topic for your first ever book.
Yeah. So the subconscious is such a fascinating part of our humanity, just this consciousness that we have. And there have been times in my life where I think my subconscious was pushing me towards a mental health journey that my physical body wasn't, sort of ready for. I know you guys have like a hypnotist coming on next week, I think. So I'm curious to hear what she has to say about the subconscious. But when I had gone to grad school, I was living on my own for the first time, like literally by myself in an apartment. And I had sought out a therapist because I thought, oh, I need somebody to help me coach through this really big transition, moving to, I was in Westchester, moving to Delaware, living alone, what have you. And so while that therapist was probably very terrible, like I don't feel like he was a good fit for a lot of people. That was sort of a step into the therapy door for me. And I sort of realized if he were different, this would have been more helpful. So, time had passed. And then about in 2017, I don't know, 2-3 years later, after I had originally seen the bad guy, the bad therapist, I just started feeling, I was noticing that I was depressed. I was sad a lot of the time. And it was weird for me because I'm a really cheery person. Like, this color is a really good representation of my personality. And so I'm outgoing and I'm bubbly, and that's how everybody's always described me. And I'm super fun and I'm, funny and all of this stuff. And I would be so sad on the weekends in between work, and I would go for walks and I would try and do things to help myself. And I just thought, like, this is not okay. Like, I really shouldn't be feeling this down. This is so strange. So I sought out another therapist who I thought would be more helpful than the other guy. Turns out she was, which is fantastic. And that sort of really kicked off this mental health journey for me. Which I won't, bore you through all the details right now, but I've been seeing that same person consistently ever since summer of 2017. So what is that, coming up on 4 years, every single week. And I have learned—
long-term relationship.
Yeah, it is a long-term relationship. It is. She actually went on maternity leave recently, and I was like, I hope that was the only time you're doing that, because I'm really happy for you, but it was a time without you. So well, obviously we meet virtually now, in the pandemic and everything, but it really taught me the depths of mental health, right? There's so many different layers. Our day-to-day mental health of, are you taking breaks throughout your workday, and are you giving yourself enough rest time? But then your long-term mental health, do you live in an environment that makes you happy? Are you surrounding yourself with people that make you happy? And so I've dedicated a ton of time to mental health. She reminds me that, like, a lot of people don't do the amount of work that you've done on your own mental health. And so when I was thinking about the book this time last year on what I wanted to write about, I thought, well, geez, we're all going through this really scary time in a pandemic. What better topic than mental health? Because people are feeling strange about therapy, or they don't know how to handle themselves. And so even if somebody doesn't want to go to a therapist, maybe they'll pick up this book and think, oh, I understand that I'm not the only one feeling this way. Other people, even a fictitious character, can feel this way too. I mean, heck, let's take Harry Potter again, right? Like, J.K. Rowling's a genius. She knew how to connect with kids through Harry, Ron, and Hermione, right? And even as an adult reading it, some of the professors as well. Big Professor McGonagall fan over here. So I kind of wanted to, different level, have some sort of connection piece that somebody could pick up the book and go, okay, I'm starting to understand my own mental health and what I've gone through over the last year, because it's been tough for everyone. There's just no two ways about it over the last pandemic timeline, however you want to timestamp that. So I'm obviously a big proponent of it. And that's what the book is obviously about. And I put a lot of time into therapy on a regular basis. So I'm always game for having mental health conversations with people.
Yeah. Someone told me that finding a therapist who's a good fit is like dating. Like, you have to be willing to go on a lot of bad dates to get a good one. It sounds like you found one after the second try, which is pretty good. But do you have any thoughts about, I don't know, how you know if someone's a good fit for you or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is so timely because it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So I did see someone else in between the guy and the person I see now. And she also was not good at all, but she referred me to the person that I ultimately ended up seeing. I held on to that business card for a while. It wasn't a quick jumping point. But the way you know if a person is a good fit for you, I would say, especially for women, like, I prefer to see female gynecologists because it really skeeves me out that men have that profession personally. But my mom sees a male gynecologist, and she has for, 30 years. So know that about yourself. Think about, like, who are the doctors, and because they're medical professionals in a different sense, right? Healthcare workers. Think about who you feel most comfortable around, or think about who you like as a friend. Like, I wanted a therapist who was going to challenge me, and not just sit there and affirm, like, wow, yeah, that does sound like it sucks, right? Or have somebody come in and say, right, but you said this a couple of weeks ago, or you said you wanted to move in this direction, or let's dig into that a little bit deeper, even if it's difficult. so I wanted like a coach, I wanted Michael Jordan behind me being like, make that shot again, trying to get better. So when I was doing my intake, form with this organization, I said that I want somebody who's human, who has a personality, who will be able to have emotion in a session. But I also want someone to coach me through things as well. Some people are really, my best friend is a mental health practitioner, and she is a big stickler for no like emotion in a session. Like your therapist is supposed to be a blank slate and just be really like question oriented and just really I don't want to say robotic, but bland. And that really doesn't work well for me at all, probably because I'm a people pleaser. And so I need some sort of external validation at all times. But that's kind of what that guy was that I was seeing. He was just really, by the book, strict and stiff. And it was so uncomfortable that I didn't feel like I could open up in a session. So there has to be a little bit of self-awareness. But I would give it, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe with the person, which sounds like a long time, but everybody has a bad first date. And then after that, they're like, oh, I think it was just, I was feeling weird that day, or this person was having, an off week. And so it got better after that. The first few conversations I had with my husband before we started dating were arguments about like the Phillies and the Yankees. So we didn't start off on a very like magical romantic foot, right? Arguing about sports players. So you just kind of have to give it, a few weeks to see if you're jiving. And then if you're not, I mean, like you said, it's kind of like dating. See if you can notice what you liked or didn't like about that person, and then, make some shifts from there. It's not easy, but it's worth it, is really the tagline for that.
Yeah. Listening to what you're saying, and I'm like, I don't think I've ever stuck with a therapist for more than 3 sessions. So maybe I need to give it a little more time. Also, it's funny what you were saying about coaching, because I feel like I go back and forth between like therapist, life coach, therapist, life coach. Have you worked with a coach before?
I haven't worked with a life coach. I have whatever special gift inside of me that means I just life coach myself through everything. So I've never felt the need to have a life coach. I have a business coach who is really helpful for my business. And I've had fitness coaches when I've wanted to push myself harder in workouts or I was training for something. But I know that life coaches can be more human, less clinical, just a little bit more down to earth sometimes than therapists can be. Sometimes they're cheaper if cost is a prohibitive factor, depending. And so while, if you do have like clinically diagnosed depression and anxiety like I do, then it may be helpful to see a mental health counselor who is versed in the DSM and can give you some recommendations. And if you do need to take medication at some point in your journey, can refer you to the right people. If you're just looking for a tune-up, or you're just looking to, touch base and get your feet wet with having somebody else come into your vulnerable space, then a life coach may be a better solution, because then you don't feel as clinical about the whole situation.
Yeah, I know for me, it's like the depression always comes up, and right, it's not like, oh, I refuse to believe I'm depressed or I refuse to take medication. It's more just like knowing people who are depressed or having read about it. Like, I just don't believe that applies here. And I don't want the first solution to be medication, 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 right? Like, at least give me some tactics to try on my own. And so some therapists have been great, but a lot of them like that, it just comes up and it's like, I can be sad sometimes without it automatically being depression. Like, give me a couple weeks before you start telling me I'm depressed.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was actually just talking to my therapist about this week. So I've never been on medication at all. We've never even discussed it. I think it came up once or twice with my primary care. And I can't say enough about him. He's so great. I know, weird me seeing a male doctor, but it's not a GYN, you guys. It's literally just, general practice. And he was like, well, if you're still feeling down after seeing a therapist and exercising regularly, then we can talk, but I'm not going to write you a script right now. And I'm so, so grateful that he did that, because a lot of doctors these days are just, here you go, here's your, slip, leave my office. And my therapist said this week, medication is great if you are having thoughts of suicide or you're in a really dark place and you just cannot lift yourself out, but it doesn't solve the root problem of where your depression is coming from. It doesn't get to that core central thing that needs to be addressed. And a lot of people don't want to face that. They just want to take a pill and be done with it. And I think a lot of therapists, just like other people who can just hang a shingle outside their house and, you know, have whatever business they want, will just write scripts because they want to give people the magic pill and they want people to just feel better instantly. And that's where they're going to get their business. So, so I think finding that root cause is not easy. It took me a really long time, and there's sometimes multiple root causes of things. But treating depression, especially through talk therapy and exercise, natural endorphins are what I think is gold standard. And if those two things don't work after 6 months or something like that, then sure, maybe, you know, medication is necessary to fix a chemical imbalance. But those two things have, historically speaking, worked for me. And to your point, Jen, yeah, it's okay to be sad sometimes. Sometimes I'm sad, I work out and I'm still sad. And you're like, well, that didn't work today. And it's fine. You watch your favorite movie, you take a bath, you are sad for, you know, an afternoon, a couple days, it passes. A lot of times it's like having a little head cold and you just have to let it run its course and then it's over and you can kind of move on. But we have gotten to a place in our culture where we just don't like being uncomfortable and people want that magic fix.
Yeah. Well, and for those people watching on Facebook, the moral of the story is not anti-medicine. It's more finding what works for you.
Oh, absolutely. So. Absolutely. Sorry, I don't mean to have driven it in that general
No, that's
direction.
okay. And you mentioned like some people do have a chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
Like, some people need medication.
Certainly. But, it's all about finding what works for you.
We got pretty far into the mental health topic. But let's talk about the impact on your mental health when you were running a full-time job, building a business, being a yoga instructor, and writing this book. How did you make time and how did you stay sane?
Wow. I wish my therapists were tuning in. So I have always been a busy person my whole life, like even since I was a child, like play dates all the time, into a bunch of different projects. Busy, you know, default is sort of where we're at. And when the pandemic sort of struck and we had extra free time, I just want to be transparent. I watched all 5 seasons of Jersey Shore and it was incredible, right? Like I knit sweaters, I did themed dinners with my partner, my husband. We did taco nights with we did the banana bread phenomenon, right? Like I just want to let everybody know, I didn't just work through the entire thing. There was definitely some lounge time going on. But starting my business just a handful of months before the pandemic, and then, you know, working a full-time job and having that change with work from home, I was really craving a creative outlet, something to like relieve stress. It is great to watch TV. It's great to read books, but it was really hard to focus early on, which I heard a lot of people say as well, especially as readers. It was just hard to concentrate on things. And so I saw writing the book as a creative outlet. It was fun. I wasn't doing it to, you know, make a ton of money, be a New York Times bestseller. I thought I've always wanted to do this and I really enjoy writing. And I know this is going to be a challenge for me in a new way. And what a great distraction. So I'm just going to give it a go. And I did. So to me, even now writing the second book, it's a place to escape to, right? Like it's a world that I get to create. It's a place where I get to grow in a fun, low stakes way. No one's grading me on it. Of course, there's going to be, you know, Amazon reviews and all of that, but hey, not everything's for everyone, right? Like I'm flexible about it. The yoga thing is something that I've carried with me through college. I was a dancer for my whole life. And when I got to college, I was still dancing, but I really missed that physical activity on a regular basis. So I got my certification, and my dad was like, this is such a great idea. You can do this forever. It's always a way to make money. And truth be told, people always want yoga because they always want to be less stressed out. So I've been teaching yoga literally once or twice a week since the summer of 2014. And so it's just part of my DNA at this point. I teach virtually twice a week to a small group of women and my dad who tunes in, which is really fun. I definitely got him into yoga. That was all my doing, but I think it's great. And so I have a very color coded Google Calendar, but I also check in with myself to see, okay, what is this activity doing, serving me, right? Like my full-time job pays my bills, and I really enjoy doing it, right? It's a career path that I'm into. My side business was a challenge, and I really like working with clients, and I wasn't sure if that was going to become my full-time gig or not. So that's sort of a I don't want to say bucket list item because I don't want it to throw it away, but something that I wanted to challenge myself to do. Teaching yoga is something I want for myself. And if I'm not teaching it, it'll fall to the bottom of my to-do list, right? So I'm serving myself, I'm serving other people. It's movement. It feels natural. It's like dance, whatever. And the writing has just become this, weekend activity, creative outlet, a new challenge. Creativity is definitely important to me. So in terms of managing it all, it feels, of course, overwhelming at times when I was on deadline with my publisher, and things were shifting and changing with workplaces and events and things like that. After we kind of had the lull, there was this surge of like, okay, now everything's virtual. So then everyone was so busy because we were just on Zoom from sun up to sundown. But just kind of looking at my schedule and seeing, okay, like what is serving me in what places? Do I just feel like I'm working all the time, or does this feel like something that I'm excited to do, is really the through line of it all.
Yeah, which is great advice for kind of how to check yourself if things are adding meaning to your life or not. There's a whole book, Essentialism, about this, about choosing just the 9s and the 10s and scrapping everything else, even though a 7 seems like a good opportunity. Leave that spot open for a 9. So this leads really well into my last question, which is for other people who are considering writing a book, what are your tips for getting started? And I'm sorry, also, I'm not sure I understand how you got published. Like you said, it was a hybrid method?
Absolutely. So New Degree Press is one of the newest publishers that work on hybrid publishing. The best way I can describe this is Taylor Swift. So she wanted to re-record her music, so she owned the rights to it. And that's when we saw the new album drop. What was that, 2-3 weeks ago? And everyone's freaking out about the Joe Jonas songs, and myself included. So the method of publishing is hybrid because it is kind of like self-publishing, like Taylor recording her own music and releasing it, but you have the credibility of a publisher who does have to greenlight you and does give you editing support and is there to be like, yes, this is good, or no, this isn't going to sell, it's terrible. Just like having a recording label say, yes, this is good, like we're going to put this out there. So the process was expedited because I had to do a lot of the work myself, but I have such an appreciation for that work. So I had to help tag my book for layout. Like I literally had to go in and mark where I wanted bullets and how I wanted the fonts to be. I had to help design my cover and cook up the idea for what the cover looks like, which is hard if you're not a cover designer, right? Like obviously I do design work for marketing and social media, but that's totally different than a book cover that's going to be like that forever. So hybrid in that it's like self-publishing with the credibility of a publisher and the support of a publisher behind you. This week was Greenlight week for my second book. So I'm just waiting to get word that I'm approved to move forward with the current story on that, which is expected publication December of this year. So it's a lot easier because you don't have to write letters or get an agent, but you certainly have to put a lot more work into it than if you did a traditional publishing house.
Right. I was gonna say, I think we have at least one author who's watching now, and I Once we get to the private Q&A, Michelle, I'd be interested to hear how you published it, how that compares. Okay, well, outside of publishing, any tips for people who are like, I have my book, I have no idea how to get started?
Yes. Yeah. So my biggest advice is to write as much as possible, because it's going to be bad. It's just going to suck in the beginning. I wrote a lot of bad dialogue, a lot of bad scenes, a lot of things that went directly into the trash can. But as you write more and you have somebody reading your work, and this can be an editor that you hire or an editor that you're working with through your publisher, they'll start to tell you what's working. And my biggest advice is to lean into what works. Don't get caught up in like, oh, this dialogue isn't that good, or like, oh, this isn't very, like, lean into what's working for you. Is it your descriptions and your really, lengthy ability to set the scene? Is it developing your characters? Is it, more poetic and having a really interesting cadence to your writing, right? So practice what works for you and just keep writing. I would also say to not show your work to a large group of people early on, because the knee-jerk reaction is, okay, I just wrote the scene, can you read it and tell me what you think? And that's really hard for somebody who's not an editor to read and give you feedback on, because like, first of all, they may not be your target audience. Like, Dan hasn't read any of what I've written ever, probably. Like, he hasn't read the book yet. I didn't have him read the manuscript. Any beta readers that I asked, I very specifically asked them because I know that I'm within their genre, or I trust them as a copy editor, or I know they're going to give me good feedback, right? And they didn't get it until I had a full manuscript done. Like, I had draft 1 of the manuscript done. So that's more important than who your publisher is, what your book cover looks like, what your book launch is. Like, it is so important just to write as much as possible to find your footing and your voice, and to not show it to someone until you have a trusted source that is going to be able to give you that feedback, which can feel hard because you think, well, what if I'm writing this whole book and it absolutely sucks? And if you do, great, your next one will be even better, right? Like, it's all a learning experience. Not everything you write down has to see the light of day. Sometimes it's just a really helpful exercise. I will do one plug here if anyone's interested in some of the workshops I did. There's a method called the gateless method. There's about 100 certified coaches or instructors in gateless. I worked with a woman named Terry Trespiccio, and she's actually doing free workshops all next week. And it is a method where you write in a very short period of time, you read your piece aloud, and people only give you positive feedback. And while you may think that sounds really kumbaya and like people are, just saying positive things and like that's not actually helpful, my writing accelerated in her 6-week program from, probably where I was in kindergarten writing that cat book up to, what you're going to get with the knowing. And then in my book coming out in December, it was incredible. I really was not expecting it. And I told Terry, I was like, I almost don't want to publish my first book because I feel like my writing is so much better now. And she was like, no, still publish it. It's good. But I hear that a lot. So if you just want to dip your toe into writing, you don't know if a book is the right source for you, you just want to do a blog or some magazine submissions, or you just want to do a little, personal memoir or something, that was extraordinary for me, finding a writing community that worked and finding a writing community that was positive and supportive. So I don't know where I can post that in the chat, maybe on Facebook or someplace else, but Terry Trespiccio is her name, and the gateless method is something to look into.
Yeah, we'll definitely get links for resources and also where to buy Val's books, and we'll share all of that on Facebook, and we'll send a follow-up email to people who have joined us in Zoom. I think now is a good time to go ahead and shut off the live stream, and we can move to the private Q&A. For the people watching on Facebook, thank you so much for catching up with us, and join us on Zoom for one of these things. We really like getting that engagement, being able to talk to you and see your face. So thanks again, Facebook users, and we're going to cut to the private Q&A now.